something. Bueno, el siguiente ponente va a ser Eric Schutz, que es Executive Director de la empresa común ARTEMIS. Va a hacer una presentación sobre, bueno, se ha titulado ARTEMIS The Next Wave. Entonces, Eric, whenever you want.
Okay. So, good morning. I think the order of all the session is a little bit strange because we started with local logistic details. I will give you now a global view and maybe a strategic view on the past, what is happening now and what may happen tomorrow, quickly, don't worry. And then Alan will go in more details on the content of what will happen in the call coming. So it's a little bit upside down, but anyhow. So what I will do is tell you a little bit what we have achieved very quickly and why there is a continuity and why is it changing this year. Everything is changing this year. You have seen that the amount that you will get in Spain is also changing. So there are reasons for that. And I will try to explain you why there is a continuity in this evolution, and then what's next, and what are the questions for the future. So, the past. Well, we have behind us almost completely 4 calls, because in the first call we had 12 projects, 13 in the second. At that time, we were still hoping that we will use all the funding, that there will be an increase in the scope, and so on and so forth. Then the crisis came. We had 10 projects in 2010, budget reduced, and then 2011 budget in all countries even further reduced, for which we have 8 projects for, with the negotiations finalized, and 1 PAP is a small project, well, will become small because we are trying to use the still available funding in some countries to make a 9th project for the call of last year. If that one is finalized in the coming 2-3 weeks, then we will have in total 44 projects. And the first of 2008 are now closed, finished. This is also a new step in the life of ARTEMIS. Okay. Now, these are projects. Step 1, project. Now in Artemis we, and actually it came from Artemisia, and at that time I was in Artemisia, we were discussing that what we should achieve in Europe is our self-sustaining innovation ecosystems to maximize the impact of what we try to do. And projects as such may be a first step, but it's only a first step. Now, these projects are not, most of them at least, like other projects. We promoted, and I always insist in all my presentation to some aspects of Artemis projects, differentiating these projects from others. We promoted the think big. The biggest project up to now was the CESAR project with around 55-60 million euro budget in total and between 50 and 60 partners. Act socio-economic. Yes, in the evaluation we gave, that was also a change on the second year of Artemis, we gave us a double weight on the impact on criterion number 4. So that's also a characteristic of Artemis projects. Impact, socio-economic impact. Another characteristic is pan-European. If we consider Eureka, and in more specifically ITEA and a little bit Catherine, these are mainly projects which are a combination of some national partners and strategies, and in average 3 to 4 countries involved. There are projects with more, but in average. In Artemis, the average is between 7 and 8. It's more pan-European. there is a stimulus for other countries to join due to the mechanism of putting money in each country and the decision mechanism to select the project inside the Public Authorities Board. So it's even not multinational, it's pan-European. I state very clearly, ARTEMIS is the only true pan-European program in the field of embedded systems. And think different, yes, we follow what I said. I think we are giving a new approach to what is needed for the industry at large of embedded systems. So keeping in mind that we try to make these projects, 44 very soon, with this in mind. So what can we say? Well, yes, indeed, we have these projects, slightly different, but then when you look at these 44 projects, you start to see that there are clusters of projects, de facto clusters, if you look at the topics. But more than that, we have organized also the contacts between these projects with technology conferences where we really cluster projects. The people are coming together to discuss the various aspects in one field as they are developed in different projects. So this is part of the ARTEMIS culture. This is part of what has allowed to go from projects to clusters of projects, the second step. And when you look at this portfolio of projects now only for the first 3 calls, you see you can identify 7, but more 4 plus 3, 4 more developed and 3 later developed clusters, and you see them there. So these are domains where not only you have the results of very good projects, but on top of that, you have exchange between these projects within a cluster. That should be the second step towards these self-sustaining ecosystems that we want to achieve. Okay, that was yesterday. Today. Well, when I say today, actually it was mid of last year. What is and what was, what is still partly, a little bit less, no, the main problem of ARTEMIS is the fact that the member states were committing far below what was expected when we, at large industry, try to create ARTEMIS between 2004 and 2008. And then we have to look to the friends of ENIAC. Semiconductor people are better organized. They have a tradition of organization since the creation of GESI and even before the mega project between Siemens and Philips. At that time, these 2 groups were doing semiconductor. But then it started GESI in 1988, yes. And they have a tradition of being very well organized. And they have developed within this key enabling technology group set up by the Commission the concept of this pilot line. And then last summer, discussing with the Commission, I got the question, well, don't we have something equivalent in the field of ARTEMIS? And then I was thinking in July, August last year, and I said, well, there is something called living labs. It's different from a pilot line, but it's also a little bit similar. And there are many activities, there are many programs, many living labs, more than 200 in Europe. It's not exactly like pilot lines, but I started to discuss with Artemisia on this. And from there, because I don't have to build that. I mean, it's you who have to express what you need, what you want. That became these AIPPs, the Artemis Innovation Pilot Projects. Still, even you can find in some presentations the word living lab, but because the word living lab is used and understood differently in many countries, it's more ambiguous. And finally, the choice was made to call it Artemis Innovation Pilot Projects. So indeed, this is the next step. So I repeat. First step, excellent projects, but single projects. Think big, pan-European, impact. But then clustering these projects with these technology days that we have established. Then a concept to be developed, AIPPs, keeping in mind the pilot lines of the semiconductor world. So, I mean, closer to the market. And of course, this is the way towards what we wanted to achieve, the self-sustaining innovation ecosystems. So 1, 2, 3 steps. Actually, what we want to do now is to move from think big to think even bigger. Why even bigger? Because these AIPPs will be very large projects. It will be more development and innovation, less research. That's why we need to keep and you have heard this morning, there is still a budget for part A of the work program, which is the traditional 8 sub-programs where we can have the traditional, not necessarily small, the traditional projects, and these projects have a high content of research. Here, it's closer to the market, more downstream, more innovation, because innovation is, you use the results of R&D to make products, to generate business, to create employment. Of course, this AIPP will remain and have to be pan-European. Impact was important. It's even more important here. So the business plan is essential. It's a weakness in many proposals that we see. Here, we will not allow a weak business plan. And a very large budget. When I said César, it's about 50 to 60 million. That was the biggest one on 3 years, so 20 million per year. Here, on 3 years, it should be in the range of at least 100 million. So it should federate all the players who can contribute in one domain to have the maximum impact that we can generate here in Europe. So, you get my slides, Mr. Foster? Yes. Yes, because I have slides on the future and they are not in anymore. Well, then without slides. Okay. So, without microphone now, with microphone. We have now these AIPPs. We could convince some countries. France was very enthusiastic. They put 30 million for AIPPs. A country like Austria, and that will be published next week, and you will see it on the internet, but Austria has money only for AIPPs this year. An important country was slightly late this year, but with good numbers. Spain, thank you. It's essential because the contribution of a country like Spain at European level is important. The history in Artemis of Spanish players is important. And so having this vacuum and no commitment was a little bit annoying. But finally, I must say that the promise was to have the numbers end of March, and we got them end of March, or 2 days later. So, and with good numbers. As a result, this year, that's today, prepared last year, this year we have this AIPP, that's new, and we have the biggest budget ever in funding globally, if you take the two parts, for Artemis. So there is a correction ongoing. It seems that this closer to the market AIPPs have convinced many countries to put money in because they expect results. So you will have to make good proposals, you will have to execute and convince that this is the right way to go. Once more, we don't forget the other part. Huh? It's cheese and dessert. Huh? It's not or, it's and. But that's today. That's today, and maybe tomorrow, just next year. The last goal of Artemis will be next year. Then it's finished. No money anymore. And that's the part 3, which was elegantly dropped from my presentation. Never trust your people, I can tell you. Part 3 is what's next. What's next is the period 2014, 2020, 21, 22, I don't know. Let's say 2020. So that's Horizon 2020. There are 2 challenges with Horizon 2020. First of all, this is a frame. And we need a budget. We heard this number of 80 billion for, by the way, a changing perimeter. So that's what's happening in Brussels every time, just to avoid that you can really compare apples with apples. They change and the perimeters are changing so that you can interpret that it's a fantastic increase or it's a slight increase or it's a slight decrease, whatever. Some people, like Mrs. Carvalho, an MEP from Portugal, are pushing to have even 100 billion. This discussion will happen in the Parliament, and there is a almost fixed calendar for all these discussions and events. But that's only the first problem. The second problem will be to have inside the global umbrella of Horizon 2020 a room, and that means a budget, for JTIs. For JTIs, and today, what we know is that the Commission, in the proposed text for Horizon 2020, has mentioned that in the case of Artemis, the merge of Artemis and ENIAC should be investigated. And to prepare that future, there are some facts already. The Commission has asked the 3 platforms, Artemis as a platform, which means Artemisia, who is taking care of the evolution of the platform, which means Eneas doing the same for ENIAC, and the EPOS platform. They have asked these 3 platforms to come to make a common strategic research agenda, but strategic research and innovation agenda. You see the influence of these AIPPs. Innovation must be part of the picture. Today there is a first document which is more a juxtaposition of 3 parts, but people are working, discussing, so there is progress in that direction. A couple of days ago, even the Commission published a call for tender to make an impact analysis of making a JTI with Artemis, one JTI with Artemis, ENIAC, and EPOS. By the way, for the consistency of that, the EPOS unit in the reorganization of IMSO has disappeared. So the microsystems will have to be in a JU or a JTI combined with Artemis and ENIAC. So everything goes in that direction. But we need to convince all the players all together. We need to convince the MEPs. And by the way, Radio Corridor in Brussels tells me that a Spanish MEP will be the rapporteur for Horizon 2020 and is not the most enthusiastic person about JTI. So some work will have to be done. It started already. I mean, letters have been sent. We are trying to get meetings, to organize meetings and so on. But MEPs will be very important because with the Lisbon Treaty, it's a co-decision. When we started Artemis from 2004 to 2008, finally at the end we had only to convince the Council, which means the R&D people in Brussels from the permanent representations of the various member states in Brussels. And the Parliament was only giving an advice. Now we'll have to convince the Parliament, the Council, the national authorities. They have also to work together with us to prepare and explain that budgets are needed, because the fourth one is the most essential one. It's the organization of the community, the large enterprise, the SMEs, the academics, all together coming with proposals, coming with the expression of their wish for the future. So, as a conclusion, I'm going to say just one thing. In the coming weeks, or in the coming months, what we are going to do or not to do will impact directly, severely, the coming years. So we have all together to work with keeping that in mind. And now back to reality and today, this change in AIPPs is an essential message that we will pass to all these stakeholders. That's why it's important that this new instrument becomes a big success. Having said that, now we can go to the rest of the presentation that I didn't touch. Don't worry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I think it was a great presentation about the past and the future of Artemis. And you made clear that you don't need any slides in order to hold a presentation, so
no,
thank you very much.
I think the slides would not have added anything more to the passion which was in that statement. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Alan Foster, Program Manager of Artemis EU. And please, Alan, okay. the floor is yours.
Well, the purpose is to explain what is in the program for the call 2012. We've already seen sort of things from the top level. You might see some repetition here, but this is because there are some things very important to keep in mind. So repetition is being used here in a constructive way. It's not that we haven't talked about the presentations beforehand. But the first thing I'd like to repeat is the slide that Eric showed earlier. These are the 4 pillars of Artemis. And he explained the 4 pillars. But there is one word on that slide in the background, which is the most important thing to remember. When you're looking at an Artemis project proposal, if you're the coordinator or if you're just a partner in the proposal, that word impact is particularly important. It means that we are encouraging people to think about the value which their contribution adds to the real innovation coming out of the project at the end of the day. This is something which is particularly important for Artemis. There are many programs out there who will take some basic research and move it a bit forward. That's fine. This is not really what Artemis is about. Artemis is talking about that bit more, that bit extra, really taking something so that it's going to have a major impact on SMEs, making them more efficient in their businesses, in large enterprises, is making them more competitive, in providing solutions for some societal problems, reducing our carbon footprint or electric vehicles or things like this. But it is really the impact at the end of the day of the Artemis project which is what we are looking for. So that is the most important word in the entire presentation if I were to give just one word. The work program in 2012, again, repetition, is split into two parts, Part A and Part B. I must apologize for this strange use of Part A and Part B. It's because we have the proposals themselves have Parts A and Part Bs, and we've got Part A and Part B in the project. It's completely confusing. But anyway, please forgive that and bear with it. The Part A is what we call the standard call. We don't like to say business as usual, but these are the same topics which have been in previous Artemis calls, which I think many people in the room may be familiar with. And if you're not familiar with, then get familiar with the people in the room who are, because this type of event is a very good way of networking with people with experience in the program. Part B, the AIPPs, these are the big ones, and we'll look in detail at what these are in a moment. Not to forget the traditional call, or the standard call, as we've said, the Artemis sub-programs. These were set up originally to, let's say, form some, not completely sealed silos, but some sort of general trends around which to concentrate the technical activities, specifically channeling them into specific types of application. The ASP1 is a very strong one, which has developed a number of very good projects with big impact, is about safety relevant design, things in the aerospace industry, the automotive industry, manufacturing, medical, anything which uses an embedded system which is in some way going to impact somebody's physical integrity, their safety. Recertification of things. Safety and security has been a very strong focus in the program, and I think for good reason. On an industrial and product standpoint, Europe has a very strong position as being a quality reference. Yeah, if you look around the world, what is going on? If you want a good embedded system for an aeroplane, you'll go to a European manufacturer, and this is a well-known feature. So this sub-program is really bolstering this, the safety relevant aspects. Healthcare systems. This is a bit of a strange topic, because we're all being told that we're getting too old, we're living too long, and we're getting grey hair and I don't know what. And it's getting to be very expensive. And when we talk about embedded systems in this domain, we are really looking at the use of ICTs specifically adapted to the very special domain of healthcare. A lot can be done to cost-effective, or make more cost-effective the healthcare systems we have in place today by using ICTs. And it is starting in some ways. In some countries there are initiatives and there is a lot of technology there, but it's not really being used. It's not being brought to the market yet. Well, this ASP2 is looking into that. What kinds of new technologies are needed in order to reduce the threshold of introducing this into the healthcare system for the benefit of everybody. ASP3, smart environments. This is the strange one. This is, well, anything to do with an embedded system which somebody uses in some way may be connected to the internet. And then this usually ends up in most people's minds as being one of these things. It calls itself a smartphone, but in my opinion it's pretty dumb, really. Yeah, it's a sort of telephone. It works okay as a telephone-ish, but it's nothing like as good as a dedicated GSM telephone. It's got some sort of personal assistant in it, which is, well, okay, goodish. But the most important thing it's got connectivity to internet via various and ubiquitous means. And if you've ever had one of these things and you've actually tried to use it yourself, you'll find it is not always very, very easy, or not immediately simple, to connect to some of these new services going on. And if we think about things like the embedded healthcare systems, where we're saying, oh yes, we'll connect your heart monitor to your GSM and off it goes. Would you really like to do that? I don't know. The technology isn't that mature yet. And the fact is that for a service provider to deploy a new service on one of these platforms, it's still a very expensive venture. And there's a lot of work to be done on things like middleware to make all of this standardized and make it happen correctly. Well, this is one area where ASP3 is looking at. Manufacturing and production automation in ASP4. Manufacturing is still an important item in the world. There are many people working in factories. There are many factories with a bad reputation for being bad energy consumers, bad carbon footprint. There's a lot that can be done in this domain using ICTs to improve the way that our manufacturing plants and production facilities work, both for modular production type of things as well as continuous manufacturing flows. ASP5, you notice that all of these have been very, very nuts and bolts hardware application-oriented ASP so far. ASP5 is a little bit more on the basic technology. Computing platforms for embedded systems. I think we all basically know that the hardware, the chip industry, has been extremely good at providing us with some extremely powerful hardware platforms to use. But I'm afraid that after 15 years or so, the fact of the matter is we are not clever enough to program these things to get the best advantage out of them. We've been trying to make platforms here and there, and we've got some software which looks as if it might be working, but it's never really as good as it should be. There is still a lack of suitable architectures which go from the basic level of the silicon chip with multiple cores on it of different sorts to a real working application efficiently and effectively, reducing its power consumption and in giving you the number of cycles, the number of MIPS you need to implement some of these very technically difficult applications which we're looking at. So ASP5 is looking more at a technology orientation, but still we ask that ASP5 project proposals link themselves into some particular application in order to provide a demonstrator of what they've been doing. Please don't forget that. ASP6, security and critical infrastructures protection. There's a lot still to be done about building in some basic protection to our computing systems and our embedded systems in order to make them usable. A small incident yesterday indicated that it is still not all as it should be in the, let's say, PC and network world today. Virus, bang, it's gone. What is the impact of this? Well, I could refer to my mother. She's 75 years old, but she's very, very active. But she doesn't have email or a computer. And why not? Well, she's heard about these viruses and things and spam, and it scares her off. It's increasing the threshold for people to access computing systems. That's one big disadvantage of it. The other one is, are you really going to trust these computing systems, you know, for e-government and things like this, all this personal data of those going on? This is possibly related more on the face of it to the world of the laptop and the computer network. But with more and more devices becoming connected autonomously to the internet, think about the ASP3 thing going on there, there is definitely a need for a strong technology development with real applications on the domain of securing these automated devices on the internet from the ground up. In other words, not sticking on a virus scanner or something, or some firewall or things like this after the fact, but really to design these embedded systems which are close to our lives from the ground up with intrinsic safety and security elements which will mean that we can be much more confident in the way that they are used. ASP7, embedded technology for sustainable urban life. Now this is everything to do with actually what sounds like quite a trivial problem, reducing your home energy consumption. Yeah, that's the place to start, or of an office building, or of a district. It's not very difficult to control the temperature of the room. Yeah, I mean, this is not really rocket science, but the problem becomes really one of huge scalability. What we are trying to do with this is to show that embedded systems cannot only just simply operate a thermostat on the wall and maybe or remotely control a radiator to reduce your consumption, or at least make it more logical and more efficient. But when you want to map that into a large office building, when you want to map that into a cluster of office buildings in a district, or even further, then you have problems of scalability. And problems of scalability usually come down to something like standardization. People agreeing on what to do. What sort of middlewares are you going to put in place in order to make all these systems interoperate with each other? It's a particularly important problem. So while the problem of controlling the temperature of a room efficiently is not particularly great, controlling the scalability of that problem so that society can benefit from the savings possible there is indeed a very important one. And that is where ASP7 is basically focusing. ASP8, up to now, this has been one, sadly, which has not been very well subscribed to. We have some projects in there. It's not doing too badly, but I would have thought when we set up the project that the human interface aspects of these embedded systems would have been something which everybody was clamoring to do, but we're still not there. We're still relying very much on the ways of interacting with computers, which are pretty well standard, a screen and a keyboard sort of thing. But this one here has got two basic axes in it. First of all, there's the obvious thing about reducing the threshold for people to use computing systems in general, making more comfortable interfaces for devices for all sorts of applications of embedded systems. It makes life easier for the user, so they'll be more inclined to use them. Okay. On the other hand, there are reports that quote that up to a third of, let's say, major incidents in industry or accidents in cars or trains or planes are caused by inappropriate presentation of information to the person controlling it, to the pilot, to the driver, and things like this. And the design of a dynamic user interface, which is going to contribute to the safety of a system, is a particularly important aspect. And this is one area where this ASP is looking. So there we have them. There are 8 sub-programs which channel the developments which we can foresee on embedded systems into specific applications. Again, specific applications. These are very general groups, but a project proposal really does need to think about a concrete end application demonstrator. We want to be able to show that an ARTEMIS project is not delivering some technological nicety which is going to sit around in a back room somewhere for some years. We want to be able to, well, let me put it in terms of my original dream. Incidentally, this has already happened, but more can still go on. You know, you have your evening news program, and after they've exposed you to all the nasty things in the world and all the wars and people suffering, they usually like to lighten things up with some news item of, well, yeah, innovation. Why not? We can show some nice things on innovation. And fairly consistently, they show you a guy with a white coat and a beard doing something with some chemicals somewhere which nobody understands, and oh, yes, all right, it might be possibly useful. But this is not what we're about. We're about actually generating innovations that are going to be very visible to society. I mean, things which are going to be a great improvement in people's lives immediately. Improvements in the healthcare system, but not from the obvious pharmacological side, but from a very pragmatic, on-your-body instrument sort of side. We're going to be demonstrating some new energy excuse me, energy control systems, which are going to make our carbon footprint as a society much better. We're going to be showing it could be cheaper to live in your house. All of these ecological things are very, very high profile these days. And if we have a television spot which says, you know, we've got this wonderful application here of the project funded by ARTEMIS, that'll be quite good. With that in mind, it's not a strict requirement, but thinking in that sort of sense is a good mindset when putting together your ARTEMIS project. Okay, we've emphasized this quite a lot, and it's emphasized even more when the projects themselves are very formally evaluated. There are 5 criteria, and each criteria has a certain number of points available to it. And these points have a weighting. Now then, for the standard call, all of the points count the same except for criterion number 4, which is market innovation and market impact. This has double weighting when the projects are evaluated. And if you lose half a point on that one, it can really put you out of the running for getting funding for your project. It is a competition after all. So if there was one criterion which I would suggest you spend more time on in really getting it right, and that is this one. But I have a slide later on which I'll show, which shows where some people fall down on that particular point. We'll come back to that later. So remembering that the project proposals for ARTEMIS really do concentrate on their market impact and market innovation. Excuse me. Now we come back to the part B, the AIPPs, the ARTEMIS Innovation Pilot Projects, the big ones. Well, Eric, no, what's going on? Excuse me. Didn't help at all. Why do we want these? Well, basically, we want to speed up what we call the innovation process. We have the goal of building. Oh, excuse me. conditioning, right. We have the goal of building these self-sustaining innovation ecosystems. This is a sort of, I don't know, pipe dream, if you like, of what ARTEMIS is about. Things are starting. Yeah, we're having spontaneous clustering of projects, which is very encouraging. There are a few centers of innovation excellence already submitted for an accreditation by ARTEMIS. We have some labels already, but it's not going fast enough. We need to do something extra to improve that part of the program. And the other thing, which, as Eric mentioned earlier, was that the budgets which were being made available by the member states weren't growing as fast as we'd anticipated them to. Now then, we have seen some very severe economic problems in the world, and it's quite understandable that, well, I mean, budgets become restricted anyway, but what can we do about this? There must be some way of improving this. And the way to do this is to actually build on what we've already started to achieve in ARTEMIS. We have these project clusters, which are already, and the centers of innovation excellence growing. They're already moving in this right direction. So how can we bolster these to really bring them to the forefront? There was also a recommendation halfway through ARTEMIS. There was an evaluation done of what's been going well and what's been going not so well. And one point was that, well, the program management, the running, the operations of the thing, as well as ARTEMIS, the industry side, should continue a much more reinforced dialogue with the member states who are involved in financing part of this activity. And this is a good way, the AIPPs are a good way for us to relaunch discussions in that direction as well, to make sure that we're all pointing in the same direction again. So that is basically the background for the AIPPs. And we have 6 of them. You'll notice that they map more or less, well, there are 6 instead of 8, but they map onto some really high activity level parts of the program already. And the numbers are more or less the same. Critical systems engineering factories is a fairly close representation of what we saw in ASP1. Innovative integrated care cycles, the second one, is a close match to what was being done in ASP2. Seamless communication and interoperability. This is the smart environments thing. This is the actual meat and potatoes of the smart environment activity. We came up with a vision that all of these interconnected devices actually form a sort of neural system for society, becoming so dependent upon them that we really need to look after them. AIPP4, production and energy system automation. Again, there's a link to the manufacturing ASP4. Computing platforms and embedded systems, again, a more technological one like ASP5. And then AIPP6, the intelligent built environment for for urban infrastructure and friendly cities. This maps very closely to what was done in the ASP6. We'll go through each of these one by one. I won't expound a great deal on each, but I hope to give just enough to encourage you to get your interest going, that you try and make contact with the people through ARTEMIS who are actually working on these to get more detail. But as I mentioned before, Europe has a strong cachet of quality things, and also the reliability of electronics, particularly in cars and airplanes and things, is a very critical and high-profile things happen if it's not good. Everything from airplane accidents, which are extremely tragic, to major automotive recalls. Remember last year, 2 years ago, I'm sorry, there was on 2 incidents, car manufacturers had to recall a large number of vehicles because the electronics wasn't working properly. What does that do for your market image? It's not particularly good, is it? So this is a fundamental technology required for that. But what does this technology mean? What this actually comes down to, development tools, the right software tools to develop the software you're going to use in the application as well, modeling, and the interactions between them. And also, how do you put these tools together in some sort of structured way that they cover in a significant part of the design flow so that it can be consistently high quality? And how do you get the different tools to talk to each other? There are a lot of technological questions which need to be addressed there. But at the end of the day, this is something which is of great importance for Europe. Another observation is that Europe has no major individual tools manufacturing company. We've got thousands of extremely good SMEs making tools for punctual parts of the design flow, but very often they're not connected to anything else. And for an SME to put that product into some other design flow, it really is quite a barrier. This is something which has to be looked at. The interoperability between these tools, the convergence around certain processes and certain ways of working is a very important thing. And you can only generate that if you've got a big enough number of people, large industries and SMEs providing the tools, all working together and agreeing principles on how this is all going to be put together. How are you going to turn European industry into a factory for high reliability embedded systems for various industries at the end of the day? It's not only important for aerospace or automotive, those are very obvious, but also the healthcare industry is particularly interested in this. We've seen some tragic medical accidents because of a lack of communication between two different parts of medical equipment, causing people to have radiation overdoses with cancer treatment. I mean, this cannot happen. This has to be stopped. And this activity here will provide us with a very strong footing in that area. Running out of time. Okay, let's speed up. I promised to speak slowly. I hope I've been doing well. We're doing okay on that front. Okay. AIPP2, innovative integrated care cycles. The observation today is that, well, electronics is used a lot in the medical world, and it's doing very well. We could do some marvelous things, but it's still a little bit isolated in where and how it's applied. And the purpose here is to look at this rather critically and see how the way that the healthcare system is put together could be a lot more integrated, with a lot more interaction between the different parts of the healthcare cycle. There's actually a lot of technologies involved in this. It goes out from everything from sensor networks through data mining for your past history and things like this. And it's fraught with difficulties because you're close to the person. It's something which requires a huge sensitivity towards data protection and security and things like this. But somehow, all of this technology, much of which probably exists already, but it's not being used because of various barriers. How can all this be put together in order to improve the cost of our healthcare system? This is ASP2, but big scale. Yeah? AIPP3, again, there's a number of issues involved in getting the communication working between various embedded systems devices. And AIPP3 is looking at taking the technological developments which we've been doing, and not just doing a one-off demonstrator, but actually building something very much like a living lab in which people can actually go and experience the use of these new technologies firsthand and give direct feedback for the development in the future. So they're looking at really building up some living labs for this type of application. AIPP4, this again is the production and energy systems optimization. We can map this to our carbon footprint as in the common way to do this. This is taking a very broad view. In fact, we will be making these presentations available through, yes? Okay. I'll show you this next slide. It's not only related to what's going on inside the factory, but also towards the outside world as well. We see a great increase in the number of interactions between the factories using their excess heat, for example, to provide district heating. So there's a strong link between what is going on in AIPP4 and actually what we will see again in AIPP6. But this is basically looking at the technologies which are required to really give some significant improvement in the way that our factories operate in terms of their environmental friendliness, and also how we manage our resources like water, wastewater, our energy, electrical energy, heat energy, and things like this. Okay, AIPP5, again, this maps very closely to the goals of the ASP5, which I described earlier. It's still not the case that we are able to use these wonderful multi-core hardware platforms which are available, and the purpose here is to define some basic platform elements to really concentrate on building a strong capability in this area, particularly for multi-core and low-power activities in the embedded system domain. There will be the idea is to have some sort of agreed generic platform, which will of course require quite a lot of activity. Okay, AAPP 6, I mentioned this before, it maps very closely to the ASP 6 we already have today. But here we're looking at building some big public demonstrators. And again, I mentioned there's quite a strong link with what was going on with AIPP 4, so who knows, we'll see what happens. This is looking basically for things like transport, urban lighting, energy management and things at the larger scale, not strictly speaking just in a single building, but of course looking at things being a big project as it is, at a much larger district or even city level. Okay, fine. We'll close that off with a summary of the evaluation criteria. On the left, you have the Part A ones, which I described earlier, with the double weighting on 4. The eligibility and evaluation criteria for Part B look very similar, but you need to look at the detail in the text. Yes, please do this. And you'll see that R&D technical excellence is the innovation part is particularly important in that one. But also the thresholds and the weightings of each has been really geared to really pick out the very best of these large initiatives. So these criteria are the way that the program is actually steered. And when we want to have good AIPPs, the way that we do that is to put the criteria against them in order to select the very best ones. The threshold on number 1, for example, this is pretty non-differentiating. Does it fit the program or not? Well, it doesn't really tell you very much at the end of the day, so that has quite a low weighting. But this magnifies the effect of the market innovation and impact even more, which has, again, a very high weighting, 20 points, the threshold of 12. So there's half of your points for the threshold, yeah, on that one criteria only. Okay, this information was all in the documentation which you can find for the call. Very quickly on what we can look at making a good proposal. I put a slide up here which looks as if it's a bit out of place. It just says JU funding. The JU funding is partly from the European Union, yes, which comes through the ARTEMIS Joint Undertaking Office, and partly from the national funding authorities. Well, what is this to do with a good proposal? The good proposals are the guys who have spoken with the national authorities in advance and got some lowdown and some real concrete information about specific requirements in their area, specific wishes on the national strategy. Does the country really want to support this project? Things about the consortium itself. There's some little rules and regulations in some areas which sometimes proposals have fallen down on at the end of the day because they're not eligible in a country because they don't have an SME to work with a large industry, for example. Yeah? So a good proposal always starts off by talking with your national authority to make sure that you've got all the bits of information you need to put your local consortium together in each country. We provide templates for writing proposals. This is normally the work of the coordinator. The coordinator fills them all in, but the way that these things work, he will send a copy of the template to you and you fill in your bit. Please do stick with the template. They've been designed to help you make a good proposal. They follow the structure of the evaluation criteria. And reading and understanding the criteria and putting the information in the right place is a good way to start. We do receive proposals where they've deviated from the template in this or other way, and it gets very, very difficult to evaluate them. If it's difficult to evaluate, then they'll just fall off the bottom. That's as simple as that. The evaluators are human beings, yeah? So please, when you're writing a proposal, it's usually good to say it like it is. Use basic language, be succinct, but be complete. Yeah? Make sure that you've got all the detail that you need there, but only the detail that is relevant is there. We see still some introductions with 2 paragraphs of basically nothing, lots of words, expanding an idea in some direction which is not particularly relevant at the end of the day. Please make sure that this is avoided. Nuts and bolts, hard, hands-on things are what is required here. You need to be convincing about the real application or the impact on the application. And this is where a number of proposals have fallen down as well. The impact criterion is important, but you must be believable, you must be plausible. If you were to take all of the market share impacts, for example, you come up to more than 100% very often. It's just not been thought through properly. But thinking of it as a business plan, you're trying to convince somebody to invest in your project, thinking of it in that light is a good way to keep yourself on the right track. And if you can tell the story of your proposal to somebody who is not an expert, is also a good test. Somebody who's not uneducated, yeah, but is just not an expert on your domain, if they can understand it, then you've got a good chance that it's a good proposal. And if you can tell the story without having to stop and think, oh, I'm missing something, then you know you've got a complete story to tell. A few more details again. One-step call only, because as was mentioned earlier, we delayed the start of the call to allow the AIPP to be set up. So there's no project outline phase, which means that if you want advice about making your project, you haven't got a first pass in order to help you out. But in order to back that up, there is a lot of contacts through ARTEMIS. There's a lot of know-how in the field there. You can contact the Joint Undertaking Office as well for advice and questions about your project proposal, to help recover from that slight loss. Okay, publication date 19th of April, next week. The deadline for full project proposals is the 6th of September 2012. Say thank you, everyone, because originally it was going to be the end of August. And that is a very unpopular time, but we managed to squeeze things inside the logistics within our own organization and within the European Commission, so we've got an extra week on the deadline there. But it doesn't mean that the deadline is later than 1700 hours.0000000. It is a very strict deadline. And again, one occasion, there's always one, yeah? Somebody starts to upload at 4:45 and then the internet goes down and the server gets blocked or something happens. There's always an excuse. Sorry, it just doesn't cut it, yeah? Always start submitting a project early. And if you submit it early, at least you've got one copy on the system which can be evaluated. If you submit again, it simply overwrites the previous one. So if you do this a couple of times, you can always have at least one fairly good copy of your proposal on the system for evaluation. So if the internet goes down at 4:45, if your ISP has gone broken, and I don't know what, all sorts of things can happen. The technology is still very fragile there. You still got one, at least one on the system. You can get all of the documentation you need from the ARTEMIS website. We've condensed it a little bit this year and directing it through to a particular place inside the Framework Program 7 website to keep all the documentation a little bit more concentrated in that way. Previous years we've had the comment there's been too much spread about, so we're trying to address that. Why is the call that way? This is the timeline again. We expect project negotiations to happen around the November time. Again, we'll be pushing for a very quick evaluation and selection procedure. And so we can start with contracts at the end of the year. Okay, just to put a couple of faces on, or just to explain one thing. We still have or detect some confusion in the world about how ARTEMIS is actually constructed. Well, ARTEMIS is a public-private partnership. We have the public sector, which is the member states, and there are 23 of them now in ARTEMIS. We have Poland joining. And the industry. Industry is represented by ARTEMIS SIA. We have representation in the room today. And they are actually responsible for anything to do with the technical work program. And the public authorities are responsible for anything to do with the money. Yeah? So if it's a financial question, your national authority is the one who's going to be able to help you. The technical part of the work program, defining the work up front, is ARTEMIS SIA's responsibility. Now, where do we come in? I work for the ARTEMIS Joint Undertaking Office. We're just a sort of executive people. We just do things. Working for the Eric Schutz, our executive director, we simply make the machine work. And if you have any questions about the execution of the project or the funding you get from the joint undertaking, it should come to us. ARTEMIS SIA doesn't know anything about it. The public authorities sometimes may, sometimes not, know anything about the joint undertaking funding because there are conditions on when we pay, which they may be aware of. And we then discuss with them, of course, when we need to understand if or why national funding isn't being paid. But we are there basically to answer all of your questions on this. But we're not just there to point fingers and say stop and things. We are there to give advice. We try to do this as openly as possible, being service-minded in order to be sure that the program and the ARTEMIS results, which are ultimately the most important thing of what we're doing here, are of the best quality possible. We have a bunch of people there. The people on the left-hand side, you can see my photograph there. We have 5 people who are basically the frontline contact for questions on Artemis projects. You can find our contact details on the website. So if you have any questions, you can contact us directly. And again, a plea, the Artemis Joint Undertaking Office, the people who are there making the program work, is actually paid for in part by Artemis SIA. And they will approach people to try and make sure that, that there is some kind of funding mechanism for this to happen. And it's a bit strange, but in some countries, for example, you can actually recover this cost through your national authority. But this is a bit of a grey area, so it's not wise to actually document that particular cost as an item in your project proposal, even if it may be eligible for your country. It's not eligible in all countries, by the way. But the message I want to bring here is that it is a good thing to become a member of Artemis SIA, because you are connected to a very important network of something more than 230, I think now actually, companies of all sizes, universities of all sizes, involved in the Artemis program. And remember, Artemis SIA defines the technical work program. They've been defining the annual work program for Artemis up to now, but they're also heavily involved in what's going to be happening in the future, which Eric spoke about so passionately earlier. So it's a good thing to get involved with Artemis SIA, because you can then have a voice in what happens in the future. And the more we are shouting the same thing, the better chances we have of getting good, substantial funding for what is, after all, probably one of the most important global technologies which we can see for European industrial efficiency in the future. This is what's going to be creating and maintaining jobs for our generation and the generations following us, after all. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry I overran a little bit. Okay.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you, Alan, for your presentation about the content of the new call and those good advices to make a good proposal. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And now the next speaker is Jesús Ángel García. He's member of the committee of the Prometeo platform and also a member of the Artemisia steering board.
Do you know what your presentation is? Prometeo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes. Bueno, en primer lugar agradecer al Minetour, bueno, pues no solamente el apoyo que se da a la plataforma Prometeo, de hecho está financiado por el Plan Avanza, sino también, bueno, pues todo lo que es la organización del evento de hoy, así como, bueno, el esfuerzo considerable que, pese a la crisis, que todos sabemos la situación en la que nos encontramos, bueno, pues han hecho un esfuerzo importante a la hora de la financiación para la call del 2012. And special thanks to Eric and Alun for attending this meeting. Bien, voy a intentar ser breve. Lo que voy a presentar es la plataforma Prometeo. Bueno, me llamo Jesús Ángel García, soy de Indra Sistemas y pertenezco a la Dirección Corporativa de Innovación. Vengo aquí en calidad de, bueno, pues miembro del comité ejecutivo de Prometeo, así como representante de la Steering Board de Artemis en el Chamber C. Bien, pues Prometeo es la plataforma tecnológica española de sistemas empotrados. Es muy importante el papel que desempeña dentro de España Prometeo, no solo en cuanto a unificar, identificar las tendencias de mercado, sobre todo la visión española, ¿no? el identificar nuevas líneas a lo mejor en las que hay que trabajar en el ámbito de los sistemas empotrados o embebidos, sino también porque, bueno, pues, sirve de canal no solamente hacia las public authorities y a los organismos que financian todo lo relacionado con innovación en cuanto a sistemas empotrados embebidos a nivel nacional, sino también a nivel europeo. De ahí que tengamos ese ligazón tan estrecho, tan cercano, pues entre Prometeo, Artemis, Artemisia, etc. Un poco los objetivos que tenemos, como digo, es pues, el identificar esas líneas, ¿no? Que eso, la única manera de hacerlo es, por un lado, como digo, pues a través de intercambio de foros, etcétera, intercambiar opiniones, líneas estratégicas que cada una de las empresas, universidades, centros de investigación involucradas dentro de Prometeo participamos, pero también a través de una información que es vital para nosotros, que son las diferentes agendas estratégicas. Evidentemente, Prometeo tiene la suya, pero que está alineada con las plataformas, con las agendas estratégicas, como puede ser el caso de Artemis, como puede ser las líneas que se definen dentro de Plan Avanza, FP7, etcétera, orientado a los sistemas empotrados. En la actualidad, a no ser que a lo largo de la mañana pues, se haya incorporado más gente a la plataforma, contamos con 215 entidades, de las cuales el 62% son empresas privadas. Curiosamente, luego lo veremos un poco más adelante, ya veremos el reparto en cuanto a empresas grandes, pymes, etcétera, pero curiosamente el mayor porcentaje que tenemos de miembros dentro de la plataforma son pymes. Pero bueno, ya veremos los porcentajes más adelante. Como digo, pues por un lado esa labor de recolección, de compartir ideas, experiencias, líneas estratégicas de cada uno de los miembros de la plataforma y esa alineación de las diferentes agendas estratégicas en los diferentes programas y los diferentes organismos de financiación nacionales e internacionales, bueno, pues nosotros dentro de Prometeo lo que hemos hecho al final, pues esto lo hemos estructurado en lo que llamamos 3 visiones y objetivos complementarios, ¿no? Uno es la de producto, que puede ser un producto hardware, software o firmware. Luego tenemos la del sistema, como una integración de todos estos, y luego los servicios, ¿no? Que sería, al final, sobre todos esos productos y sistemas, que nosotros tenemos un concepto de sistemas, no solamente sistemas integrados, sino los sistemas de sistemas, para la creación de sistemas mucho más complejos. Bueno, pues también contemplamos cuáles son los servicios finales que van a generarse. El caso típico, pues planteaos cualquier proyecto o cualquier desarrollo orientado, por ejemplo, a las Smart Cities. Bueno, pues dentro de la parte de producto tendríamos desde los sensores básicos, es decir, cualquier empresa que se dedique a fabricar sensores o dispositivos atómicos. Luego estarían los sistemas donde integramos en un sistema más complejo y finalmente los servicios que se darían pues desde una administración pública, en caso de las Smart Cities, como sistemas más complejos que estarían, por ejemplo, embarcados en un avión o en un coche. Dentro de todo este planteamiento, bueno, pues esto lo hemos representado, ¿no? Esas 3 visiones lo hemos representado en estos ejes, donde, bueno, pues vemos que Prometeo cubriría en esa diagonal, cubriría todos esos aspectos. De ahí tenemos identificado los diferentes programas. Aquí, bueno, nos hemos centrado un poco en esta presentación en lo que son los programas y plataformas europeas. Si nos damos cuenta, la Artemis aparecería aquí muy cerca, por eso comentaba lo de sistemas de sistemas, aunque también cubriría parte de dispositivos, pero bueno, que llegaría hasta aquí, donde está muy cerca de la innovación y muy orientado a la industria, que como habéis visto, la convocatoria tradicional ya tiene un foco muy importante orientado hacia la industria, pero bueno, los pilotos aún más todavía. Dentro de Prometeo, bueno, pues como digo, toda esa recolección de ideas, tendencias, etcétera, intereses de cada uno de los participantes, lo que hacemos luego es priorizarlo, ¿no? Los criterios para priorizar cada una de estas líneas que se han identificado, pues es diverso, ¿no? Depende un poco de los programas, depende un poco de si todo el mundo al final tiene una idea, una tendencia clara o un interés claro por una tendencia concreta, pues evidentemente a eso se le da prioridad. Otras veces también hay que valorarlo en base a los organismos y programas que financien esas líneas, ¿no? Si, por ejemplo, se identifican 3 líneas de las cuales pues, este año pues, solamente hay capacidad de financiar una de ellas, o el mercado español está preparado tanto para producir como los usuarios finales, que van a ser los consumidores de esos productos, están preparados en el aspecto tanto social como en cuanto a el poder desplegar esos servicios, bueno, pues se prioriza en base a esos criterios. Esto lo que quiero decir con todo esto es que al final, bueno, pues toda la documentación que se genera de Prometeo se actualiza, es un documento vivo, se actualiza cada año, bueno, se publica cada año, pero se está trabajando con él durante todo el año y siempre intentamos al menos tener como mínimo 2 presentaciones plenarias reuniones plenarias de Prometeo. Bien, voy a ir un poco rápido para tampoco aburriros. ¿Qué hemos hecho en 2011? Aparte de hacer ese seguimiento, esa actualización de la agenda estratégica, como actividades de diseminación, pues en 2011 hemos hecho 2 jornadas taller. Esto es lo que intentamos hacer es, en base a esos programas, a esas prioridades, a esa recolección de esos intereses, pues lo que hacemos es, en esas jornadas, pues ponemos todos encima de la mesa las cartas de lo que queremos hacer, y de ahí incluso hay muchas veces que se generan proyectos. De hecho, para la convocatoria tradicional del 2012, pues hay algunos proyectos que se van a presentar y que han surgido a raíz de estos talleres. Como digo, se han hecho 2 este año, uno en Bilbao y otro en Madrid. Los temas que se trataron principalmente, pues este año, las líneas que identificamos como estratégicas eran los sistemas embebidos para Smart Cities, la seguridad en sistemas embebidos y la interacción con objetos móviles. En diciembre de 2011, pues celebramos el taller donde con todo esto que hemos identificado, ahora vamos a orientarlo al programa Artemis y al programa FP7. Y ahí se montaron 3 mesas redondas donde, las líneas que se trataron en la mesa redonda número 1, metodología y diseño de sistemas empotrados seguros de bajo coste, que estaría ligado a lo que comentaba de seguridad en sistemas embebidos. En otra mesa, Smart Environment, entornos inteligentes orientados a lo que eran los servicios de vehículo eléctrico. Y en la tercera, interoperabilidad para sistemas empotrados en Smart Cities. Aquí, hacemos una mención a extensiones del proyecto Sofía, que es un proyecto concedido en la primera convocatoria de Artemis y que, es un proyecto en el que hay una importante presencia española. Y Smart M3 es la arquitectura que se proporciona, que es abierta, por cierto, dentro de Sofía. Bien, aquí, ¿qué es lo que veíamos? Pues veíamos un recorrido a este proyecto que ha finalizado recientemente y se le quiere dar continuidad, y de ahí se han generado una serie de productos que van a dar lugar a la creación de nuevas propuestas, nuevos servicios y nuevos productos. Bien, como digo, todo esto pues siempre lo estamos orientando un poco en base a, si se abre una convocatoria específica en la que hay algo en lo que se pueda encajar relativo a sistemas empotrados, pues se organizan, como digo, y se activan estas ventanas. Bien, ¿qué queremos hacer en el 2012? Evidentemente, pues seguir con el programa, mucho más ahora todavía en Artemis, teniendo en cuenta pues lo que ya se han comentado de los pilotos, de los Innovation Pilots de Artemis, aumentar el número de propuestas. Quizá más que aumentar, focalizar aún más las propuestas, quizá tener más presencia española en propuestas mayores, de mayor impacto, mayor calibre y con mayor cooperación entre los diferentes socios españoles. También intentar tener mayor presencia ya no solamente en Prometeo, sino como estamos haciendo hasta ahora, en plataformas europeas y en organismos que nos permiten canalizar el mensaje de la visión española en programas como Artemis, pues, a través de aumentando la presencia en Artemisia, ya no solo como miembro, sino también en la steering. Y diferentes actividades de colaboración internas, externas y integración con las diferentes, publicitación a través de las diferentes redes sociales y comunicación con las diferentes redes de excelencia europeas. Bien, como una foto rápida, miembros que pertenecemos a Prometeo y que tenemos presencia en Artemisia, dentro del Presidium tenemos la suerte de contar con Irene López de Techniker, y en la Steering Board pues tenemos a Pedro Ruiz, a Roberto, tenemos a Irene también, evidentemente, a Estíbaliz de Tecnalia y yo mismo de Intra. Para que veáis un poco el interés que desde Prometeo se está teniendo especial foco en Artemis, fijaos que de todos los miembros que hay en Artemisia, el porcentaje de participación española en las diferentes cámaras que hay. En la cámara A, que son las de las pymes, pues el 16% corresponde a la participación española, el 22% de la cámara B corresponde a participación española en centros de investigación y universidades, y en la cámara C, el 8% estamos ahí. En cuanto a miembros de Prometeo, todos los miembros de Prometeo, por ejemplo, que estamos en la C, pues somos miembros de... todos los que estamos, en Artemisia, en la Steering, en el C, pues el 100% es miembro de Prometeo. Como veis, los porcentajes son muy altos, 73% de los que estamos en Artemisia, bueno, pues de la cámara A son miembros de Prometeo, 76 en la cámara B, y bueno, asociados no tenemos ninguno. Se han organizado también una colaboración, en concreto con Artemisia, bueno, pues se han organizado diferentes actividades de diseminación y de comunicación conjuntas. Una de ellas es la del día de hoy, viernes 13, que se está celebrando aquí ahora mismo. Y luego se han celebrado, bueno, anteriores, bueno, pues tenemos una el 18 de marzo y otra el 23 de marzo. También se han mantenido reuniones con Minetur, con CEDETI y con otras plataformas, incluso y también evidentemente con la JU y con otras plataformas. Y bueno, pues esto yo creo que es más interesante ya lo que lo veis, porque no tiene mucho sentido no ir viendo cada uno de los eventos que ha habido, ¿no? Pero bueno, como veis, hemos estado presentes en todos los Broker Age, en las Summer Camps, en todas las COSAMIT entre ITEA y Artemis, etc. En cuanto al comité ejecutivo, que formamos parte de Prometeo, bueno, pues está el Grupo Mondragón, Telven, la Politécnica, Acciona, Tecnalia e Indra. 215 entidades. Lo que comentaba en cuanto a pymes, pues frente a 35 grandes empresas, tenemos 98 pymes actualmente en esta plataforma, que es un porcentaje muy alto. Siempre, desde todos los programas de I+D, siempre se ha incidido mucho, ¿no?, en el mensaje de que, bueno, que hay que fomentar la participación y la presencia de pymes en estos ámbitos. Y bueno, aquí en la propia plataforma es un claro ejemplo de ello. Cuanto a universidades y centros de investigación, tenemos 35 universidades y 31 centros de investigación. Bueno, aquí estos son los logotipos de los que forman parte del comité ejecutivo y bueno, eso es todo. Simplemente, pues como decía al principio de mi presentación, bueno, pues agradeceros la presencia y el interés y la asistencia a este evento. Muchas gracias.